What is up, everyone? Brandon First, aka First Report, representing the First Off the Bench Podcast Network. Everyone comes off the bench, but we are first. Welcome into the In the Paint, our first college basketball podcast of the 2021-22 season. Of course, myself and my co-host, as always, Raider Jim Martinez. You can find Mr. Martinez at Raider Jim 1090. How are you doing today, sir?
Hey, I'm doing great. I was reflecting before I clicked go and we got on the air here, and wow, I just can't believe that, we were doing this a year ago. We talked to Matt Santangelo from the original Gonzaga team that started off the whole thing for them. We went through the Final Four. We went through the race season with Kentucky Derby. We've seen so much. And I can't believe that the Breeders' Cup is behind us. And here we are, once again, kicking off NCAA basketball. Where does the time go? But I couldn't ask for a better way to spend my time.
Amen. And I hate to say it, but I think we all kind of know it. When we sit down and record our tournament preview, we will probably reflect on how quickly it seemed to have gone from this episode all the way, of course, until then. We'll be with you weekly to break it all down all the way through, of course, the national championship. But a lot of house cleaning to do before then. Pretty much most big time teams have begun their season. A couple big time games already have gone off. We have our normal, I believe it's the Champions Classic or the Coaches Challenge, whatever you want to call it. There's so many these days. But that's where we will start with some of these early season showdowns. Look, in college basketball, you're definitely not losing out on the tournament in November for a lot of these teams, November and December. Obviously, college football, different story. You lose game one or game two, you might actually fall out of the top four, whatever it is. But in college basketball, plenty of time to recover. So not devastation, but more for the winners to kind of hang their hat on. And we'll start with Kansas taking down Michigan State. Seem like they start the season off against each other every year. Duke takes down Kentucky in a big time showdown that I believe was at Pauley Pavilion. You don't see too many of these true home games, but UCLA was able to take down Villanova coming back late. I think they were down 4 with about a minute and a half to go. They force overtime, end up beating Villanova. And of course, we will get to Gonzaga taking down Texas in the Gonzaga season preview with Raider Jim here in a moment. But Raider Jim, early on, what were your thoughts? Most of these teams have played 2 or 3 games, but in terms of the big ones that we've seen, what were your thoughts early on?
I'll tell you what, Michigan State wasn't a real surprise. It's like it was. It is a surprise and it's not a surprise. What happened last year? Remember how Michigan State came out of the blocks? They just weren't the old Michigan State. And I think they went tooth and nail just to get themselves into the tournament, where it wasn't the Tom Izzo, let's take charge, guys. It was just over. And now it seems like Kansas, on the other hand, came out and played like Kansas. This is what you expected to see out of this team. So more so than, wow, good for Kansas, it was another, I wonder what's going to happen with Izzo and his boys this year. I was trying to see where they are on the schedule. I didn't happen to, actually, their next big game will be on December 1st against Louisville. And so other than that, that's going to be their first real test. So they've got a few games between then and now to get things together, get organized. But, these early games, as you said, they're still months ahead, weeks ahead of us as far as college basketball goes. But a lot of times, these are the games that people look back at and say, yeah, you built yourself. And we will get to Gonzaga, but you look at the early season Gonzaga schedule and, oh my gosh, that's running the gauntlet, if you ask me. But, Michigan State was great. UCLA, great comeback against Nova, but Nova really kept them running. And that's one of those things, like you always hear me say on football, if the coaches are paying attention to the films, you're going to see what was the weakness, what drove UCLA to the point where they had to fight with everything they had at home to get that victory. And kudos to them, they did it. They've got 4 guards that are already, it's early in the season, I know, but they've got 4 guards that are averaging in double digits right now, and that's to their good feather in their cap, I guess I should say. But and again, they've got to play this week, as does Gonzaga, but it's next week is going to be that big, almost the last year it was supposed to be Gonzaga and Baylor at Thanksgiving. It does never happen. So this time it is going to be the 1 and 2 they are going to play. Is it going to be a statement game for somebody? It is, yeah.
Yeah, that's going to be a big one. I think, for that UCLA Villanova game, once again, I kind of when these big teams get together early on, it's like I said, it's rare. It's a true home game. Maybe they'll play at Staples Center, and yeah, okay, look, UCLA is probably the home team there, but it's not considered. It is still somewhat considered a neutral site for Villanova to go across country. I think Jay Wright knows. Look, outside of them, getting shut out or something ridiculous, there were no tournament ramifications for Villanova in a negative sense by losing to the number 2 team in at Pauley Pavilion. And conversely for UCLA, that's a statement game, I think, for them early on, because UCLA of late has had those early season single digit numbers preseason wise, and you just wonder, okay, are we going to kind of see the resurgence of UCLA? And they struggle, they fall to, teams early on that, last year, for better or worse, it was San Diego State. And I know UCLA was very injured in that game. I understand that, but that was a situation where it kind of early on, everyone went, okay, here we go again. And I think early on, probably 5 minutes to go in that game, Villanova's up 5 or 6, and you go, wow, this team just came across country and they're going to handle their business. UCLA fights back, gets the job done. As a USC fan, I can't give them too much credit, but I will give them as much credit as I can, at least early in November, early in the season. But a nice win for UCLA and all the teams we just talked about, but a perfect lead into really Gonzaga. As Raider Jim talked about, for Gonzaga, it's kind of reversed for a lot of these teams. Gonzaga has to get their meat on their bone now. With all due respect to most of the teams in the West Coast Conference, beating Portland by 20 is not going to turn a whole lot of heads in January or February. So the wins over Texas, the opportunities against UCLA will be there. But Raider Jim, what do you got for Gonzaga's season preview as they try to avenge last year's national championship loss?
Yeah, they made it all the way to the dance. They made it to the last dance, and they just couldn't pull it off. And that has happened to them a couple times now. The last time it was against North Carolina. I believe that was 17 when that happened. This is, it always happens. We all have our favorite teams, the people we follow. And when they have that big season, the big win, it's just like, wow, look at how great these guys played. And you see the upperclassmen that move on, or those first year, 1 year, one and done guys that move on. Jalen Suggs is the gentleman I'm thinking of right now. And you sit as a fan and you can't help it. You just ask, well, how do they come back from this? How do they duplicate this effort? It just can't happen. And it seems like I have been saying that since 1999. Oh man, Casey Calvary's gone. Oh, Dan Dickau's gone. Blake Stepp's gone. Kevin Pangos is gone. And they just churn these teams, the Kansases, the UCLAs, the Dukes. They're factories. They are just factories. And it was a big test, I believe, playing number 5 Texas this past weekend. And I really didn't know what to expect. I sat down with a lot of trepidation, hesitation. You want your team to win, but you just don't know, because if you read up on Texas, they're going to be able to challenge Gonzaga. They never really challenged Gonzaga. I mean, they played such a well-rounded game. And after Chet Holmgren, the young freshman, he got such kudos and attention after their opening game against, a lesser quality. I don't know. I don't like to say anything that doesn't sound right. But, they're not D1 powerhouse, the team that they played. But that kid came out. He had 7 blocks, 37 points. He had double rebound. He got a double-double that night. And so all eyes were on Holmgren, which was good because it took all eyes off of Timmie, who ended up with 37 points, 7 rebounds, 3 assists, and played 40 minutes. and he was in charge out there. Rasir Bolton, 16 points. Andrew Nebhart, 9 points. They are as well-rounded as they have been the last 2 or 3 years. And Holmgren, the more he plays, the more minutes he gets. He got into some foul trouble, which, and of course, the hometown guy here, the home team guy was, that was questionable call. And I think they were. But Gonzaga is well-rounded, ready to play. They will make their statement if they can get through these first 2 weeks of the season, especially next week, where they're going to take on UCLA, get a break, and then play Duke. And if they get through all that, and if you can go into December 1st saying we beat number 5, we beat number 2, and whatever Duke will be ranked by that time, I think they finally broke into the top 25. But I think, did they break? Oh, actually, no, they're in the top 10. They're number 7 right now. So, wow, if you can take out 3 top 10 schools, kind of hard to question if you really deserve to be number 1. And at the same time, I will say, been very interesting to watch the competition in the West Coast Conference. These aren't rollover and die guys anymore. These teams are out to a strong start. Even USD down here, I think it was USD took out Cal.
They almost did. I believe that game went to overtime. They did take out Nevada, however.
Then maybe it was UC San Diego.
Yes, it was. You are correct.
Yeah, so
UC
I don't
San
know if
Diego
that
did
speaks
beat
to the
Cal.
I don't know if it speaks to UCSD and USD, or does it speak more towards what's going on with Cal's team? But either way, great games by both the local teams against a big school like that. When you can go in, you're not supposed to play the Pac-12 that way, and these guys did. But I know yesterday St. Mary's struggled a little bit, but they still came out with the win. Santa Clara is off to a strong start. Santa Clara, I think they took out Stanford early on. So it's going to be a raucous time in the West Coast Conference. It's not going to be a cakewalk by any means. And again, anytime you got the number 1 target on your back, everybody wants to shoot a bullseye. So, but it's going to be a great season. I'm already very excited about the whole thing. Gonzaga has a game tomorrow. I think they're favored by 29 or something like that. So, we'll get past that game. And I've heard a couple of the interviews, and the kids, the players, they have been very much. They asked one of the guys, it might have been Bolton, well, what about UCLA? What about Duke? And he basically came back with, well, but our next game is against X. That's what we're planning for. When that game's over, then we'll worry about UCLA. When that game's over, we'll worry about Duke. And I was like, there you go. That's the mentality. So View's got them in the right mindset.
Yeah, I agree. And I love that you brought up the factories of college basketball. And it's rare. So we have all these factories, and I'll use UCLA as an example. Now, it's been a while since UCLA has been as successful as Gonzaga or, really any other West Coast team. UCLA has been pretty average over the last 15, 20 years. But if you look at who's come out and gone to the NBA, you're looking at, Russell Westbrook, you're looking at Kevin Love, you're looking at Lonzo Ball. So it's not like these guys haven't had talent. It's been meshing them together, been getting them to play together. And I think that's Mark Few. You can sit there and say, look, we're Gonzaga. We're going to go to the dance every year. We're going to be top 5 every year, blah, blah, blah. And look, I could do that. That's how some people recruit. And you know what? They have 2 or 3 good years, but eventually the luster kind of fades. Mark Few isn't that guy. And, he is someone in that area, probably could have jumped ship a long time ago, has stuck through, and it's been great for him. And when you have arguably the best player in all of college basketball and arguably the best freshman in all of basketball, oh, and guess what? They're both pushing 7 foot. I think you're going to be just fine. But I agree with you. The one thing with the West Coast Conference is Gonzaga is going to play every single game past January where the other team is staring at them as a famished lion and they are just laying there because they're going to get everyone's best shot. That is everyone's national championship game. If they can hang their hat and say, you know what, we didn't make the tournament. We went 15-15, but we took down Gonzaga. that is something. So every team is going to go after them. But it's going to be a fantastic season. And I know we're all really, really excited to see how it kind of goes, because last year, I think Gonzaga exercised a lot of demons by getting to national title game and kind of proving to a lot of people that weren't sold on them after 2 months of not really playing, on CBS. They're not right in front of them at 5 o'clock on ESPN or 8 o'clock on ESPN. You have to wait till 9 o'clock or midnight in some places to see him play St. Mary's, and then to go out and really dominate their way all the way to a national title game where, look, there's no harm in being the second best team in all of college basketball. And unfortunately, that's what the case was last year. But
and if I may, I don't want to get too far down the road here, because something else I'm going to bring up ties into this. But, for the first time that I can recall, several years ago, wow, it might even be going back 10 years ago, Gonzaga had a young man playing forward/center for them, Josh Heitfeld, volleyball player, big, strong kid, and ended up getting into some issues for possession during the offseason, and they had to weather that. Aside from that, Gonzaga has been a trouble-free program. And unfortunately, it was before the season started, late summer, when the news broke about Coach Few being popped in Idaho, I believe it was, for driving under the influence. And then, of course, they had to release body cam footage showing that he was a little, testy with people. And so he has had to address that. He had I think they asked him about it at a press conference going into the Texas game, and he said, sorry, we've moved on from that. And that was just it. He did not elaborate. He's going to get the jeers when he goes to the other, the arenas, the away games. He's going to get the jeers. There's going to be the posters. But I will tell you, if anybody has ever been to any college arena environment, and I have been at Gonzaga and watched the kennel in action, they're used to it. They're used to hearing all the screaming and yelling, even though that's for the opposition. They're not going to be fazed by it. And I think there is such a respect for Coach Few that all it's going to do is make the Drew Timmies of the world step up as the leader and say, we got to shut down the crowd. And they're just going to let it happen on the court. And it's not going to bother them. But it was unfortunate to see, especially a guy like Coach Few. He's a human being, and that's not excusing anything, just not excusing anything. But then for me, that leads into the situation at Duke. And what are your thoughts on that?
It's difficult because for me, over the last few years, it's sometimes I feel like a lot of times the story comes out and it's an immediate reaction. And 2 or 3 weeks later, we realize that either a piece was missing or something was very wrong or something that essentially the reaction came out and we probably jumped the gun, or, the reporting maybe jumped the gun. Now, when you read it first off, and I've only kind of glanced it over, and I guess maybe a bit of my naivety, I try to stay away from stuff like that. Obviously, Mike Krzyzewski's, it was his grandson, I believe, who was driving the car. And then there was a player who was in the car, something with aiding and abetting a drunk driver. I'm not sure the specifics, but it definitely shows some being in the wrong place at the wrong time. My mom used to always kind of say, look, you might not be the person doing something, but you're in charge of what you're doing at the time, who you're with. If you know that individual is, I'm not going to say sketchy, but for lack of better term, sketchy. There's been in some situations that I wouldn't put myself in that situation. They do. Probably want to make sure you're aware of that. And it's just an extra added distraction to this team. I think you're a team already that has a ton of pressure on you just because of the name on the front of your jersey. You're the rock stars on campus. This is Coach Krzyzewski's last year. He's, his retirement party. So there's that pressure to try and give him a title or give him a run. And then things like this happen. It's a young team. For me, it's frustrating, and it's a little too common But for the fact of it seems to be a little more institutionalized with the coach's grandson being a part of this. I mean, look, this isn't the first time we've seen college athletics and DUIs intermesh, not even coaches wise, just look, kids being kids, whatever. But it's one of the first times I've seen that it's been the coaches in there. It seems scandalous, and it probably is scandalous. I hope that the powers that be that are doing the investigations and are in charge of the punishments do their due diligence. It's just an unfortunate situation of kids being in making bad choices, and it all kind of being now a situation where this is going to turn into something that for a lot of those players, they probably don't need.
Yeah, apparently there was a Duke player that had been drinking.
Okay.
And he was drinking, and I don't understand if it was his vehicle or a vehicle he had borrowed or whatnot, but he had been drinking. He asked Coach K's grandson, "Hey, you drive," who had also been drinking.
Yeah.
So we have two things going on right there. I think the part that doesn't set well with me, and it should always be first and foremost, the universities have to have the character to enforce the disciplines that should be there. There need to be a character accountability, and you have to, you represent the team, as corny as that may sound. And especially with, the Henry Ruggs situation of late, the Coach K situation, and you're right, it's not, this isn't a lone thing, but this is a big program. And for me to hear what had happened, and then the first game after it happens, oh, he's still going to be in the lineup until we really find out what happened.
Yeah.
That's not what you do. That can't be what you do, because if he wasn't Coach K's grandson, I can't believe that that's the way it would be handled. And that's kind of disappointing. If you get, I mean, you read anything about Duke these first couple of games, this kid's getting hot press about how good he is. And then boom, bang, and it's just like, oh, what I understand is within the last 24 or 48 hours, they have said this kid's facing charges. They both are. So, and then it was, so they may have to miss a game. One game? They should let them, they should have them sit out until regular season starts, if you ask me. But again, I'm not the coach, I'm not the university, but it'll be interesting to see. I think as they have done in horse racing with the Safety and Integrity Act, it almost seems like you have to have one governing body for the NCAA that says, hey man, we've got to have rules. And each university has to do that, which they somewhat do. I just don't know who polices it and enforces it.
Well, and I mean, look, when you're talking about the NCAA, that's a whole nother rabbit hole to be heading down. And I think we'll get to it here in a bit. I think their attention has been pulled off of a lot of things like that are very important. Their attention now is kind of, I don't want to say saving face, but saving, money at this point. And I know that sounds crazy, but once again, I said we'll get to it here in a bit. The name and image likeness thing. They've been having to deal with that for the last 2 years, and that's been for better or worse on their mind. I'm sure that most resources have been going to, I guess, combat that. I know it sounds terrible, but that's really what it has been. It's very unfortunate, like I said, for the people involved that aren't involved. And I mean those players and that are going to have to answer those questions. And like you said, I mean, it's let's see, Pablo Banchero, I believe, who is yes, Paulo Banchero, who is, I believe, was right behind Chet Holmgren in terms of the rankings or, the incoming freshman, big time size. Looks like he's going to be, a fantastic player. And as you said, has been allowed to play. And it's a really tough situation. It's a perfect segue into one of my teams to watch. It was Duke. And, I did kind of write down that they're already 4-0. Their really only impressive win so far was over Kentucky. All the others, you would expect to beat the teams they beat. Coach K, besides all the grandson drama, you also, as I said, have the the retirement season, and I'm sure we'll see all kinds of stuff from awards or funky little gifts he gets from the teams in the ACC, blah 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 blah. But I really did think the freshman duo of the aforementioned Paolo Banchero and another kid is Trevor Keels, a guard, another true freshman that I believe could definitely handle the point as well. But once again, this complicates things right now. And the more I think clapback, or the more, I guess, non-cooperation that the Coach K, the grandson, Paolo give, I think that will determine if they just go in hands up and go, we screwed up. What do you got for us? They'll probably get suspended 5 games and they'll be fine to play ACC play. If this turns into, we'll take you to court, blah, 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 it could be an indefinite suspension and really kind of soil that season. But that was one team that I had as my team to watch. For better or worse, like I said, it is Duke. It is the big time blue blood that we all think about, but it also is Coach K's last year, and definitely had a rough time the last few years, but has been a stalwart there in North Carolina. But Raider Jim, what are your thoughts on that, or any other another team you have to watch as well?
Yeah, that's another thing. It's hard to see this happen to Coach K when it's his last year. That's a program. It's the Notre Dame of basketball. You love them or you hate them. And some people, I have met people that absolutely despise the Duke program and Coach K. Hey, not his fault. All you got to do is beat them. That's what I always say. Well, if you don't like that they're undefeated, beat them, and then take him out, and then it's a done deal. So I just hope it all goes away. I hope it's handled properly, and I hope he comes out. I hope he's not remembered, and I don't think that will be the case. But you'd hate to even see it be a footnote on his career that, oh yeah, then there was the time he let his grandson play when his grandson got, just to keep his team going, type of a thing. I don't want to see that footnote. So best of luck to Coach K, whatever happens to the young man. It's one of those things that is the premise of critical thinking. For every action, there is a consequence. So you're going to have to just deal with it. Teams to watch. Oh, wow. Early on, but how many are there that I like to watch right now? I don't think the Villanova loss to UCLA is indicative of how they're going to end up playing. I think they're going to be one of the stronger teams, as is Michigan, who has also got a loss on their resume, but I think they're going to be good. And on the West Coast, something about the Oregon Ducks. They're going to be fast. They're going to put up points, and I think they're going to be one to watch. I have not followed too closely, unfortunately, the Aztecs. So
they're already they did fall to BYU. It was, I think, a 6-point game, which is not anything to laugh or scoff at, because I believe 81-49 was the final. I believe BYU really took Oregon to task the other night. So, once again, losing out to BYU for San Diego State, they're not going to start the 21-0 like they did a few years ago, but not a terrible loss for them, as BYU really does look like, a team that Gonzaga is going to have to answer for here in a few months in that West Coast Conference. So San Diego State 1-1 so far, but their season really kind of gets rolling here in a few weeks when they start get outside of the St. Catharines and the Point Loma Nazarenes that they have.
Oh, even tonight, it's tonight they're playing Arizona State, correct?
Oh, okay, there you go. Yes, that's right. They do have one. Yeah, so that'll be an interesting one for them. Arizona State, I don't think it's been the usual kind of not dominant, but or contender. Is this the year that Arizona State really does something here? But it'll definitely be a nice benchmark for San Diego State there.
Looking at the calendar, wow. Aztecs have themselves a tough stretch between now and the holidays. They've got Arizona State tonight, which again, not the toughest game, but it'll be good competition. But next week, they're going to play Georgetown.
Mm-hmm.
December 4th, they're going to play Michigan. And then on December 17th, they're going to play St. Mary's. And then December 22nd, they're going to play UC San Diego. And again, I don't know what's going on at UC San Diego, but they could be one of those teams like the Manhattan Mad Jaspers. And all of a sudden, the big dance, they could be that first round upset team.
Yeah, and they've already, I mean, they were a D2 powerhouse for a
Yeah.
while before obviously moving to the D1 level a couple years back and made a statement early on already by beating Cal. So yeah, UCSD, definitely keep an eye on them. I'm going to double down on what you said about Michigan. I think Michigan is definitely a team to watch. You obviously, Hunter Dickinson, someone we talked about last year, came back to Michigan. Probably, him and Drew Timmie right there for best big men in the country. You can probably split your hairs on that one when it's all said and done. And then I also really like it the point guard position, veteran Eli Brooks. You always got to have veteran leadership at the point. And then freshman guard Caleb Houston, 6'8". I love guards that have that type of size. Matchup nightmares in the Big Ten, and then later on. Obviously, Kansas is a team that you always have to keep an eye on, but in this generation of one and done, it's really, you don't see too many teams bringing back 4 players, period, let alone 4 returning starters. And I think all these starters, all these players here on Kansas, Bill Self included, really want to avenge that loss to USC last year in the second round, where they were handled very easily. Another team, look, it's the SEC, so you're dealing with a lot of football schools, if you will, and this is definitely one at the top, but keep an eye out on Alabama, a fantastic group of guards there in Alabama. You have Jaden Shackelford, um, fantastic last year. He'll need either Keon Ellis or Javon Quinterly to step up, ideally both. The one question I do have for Alabama is the size, which they just don't have a ton of. But like I said, the guard play will be key for Alabama if they do want to make a run. And then the last one, kind of a Cinderella. I mean, it's a mid-major pick. They are ranked currently. But when you look at St. Bonaventure, this was a team last year that definitely turned some heads. And if you are a mid-major, you have to have one of 2 things, ideally both, but definitely one of these 2 things, either an experienced backcourt or a talented big man. They do have the experienced backcourt. You got Kyle Lofton and Jaron Holmes. In terms of the big man, that's kind of where I do believe they're lacking and will probably eventually be their downfall. They did get transfer out of Pitt, Kareem Kubali, who's 6'8", but he's only 215 pounds. Once again, maybe in the Atlantic 10 will be okay and we'll be able to survive there. But I think if, you do get into that, the weekend portion of the first round, or essentially the second weekend where you're looking at the Sweet 16, the Elite Eight, that's where I do believe the big man shortage or lack thereof will struggle. Because look, if they get matched up early on with Gonzaga or Michigan and having to deal with those twin towers at Gonzaga or Hunter Dickinson at Michigan, it's going to be very difficult. You better make a lot of shots because you're not out rebounding that team. So for St. Bonaventure, keep an eye on them there. But like I said, they're going to need a lot from a 6'8" transfer. Hopefully put on some weight, since College Basketball Reference updated his weight at 215. So, the holidays are coming around, so feed that man. But anyways, moving on to, I believe, some of the news that really, I think, overshadowed a lot of the recruiting and the transfer season of the offseason for college sports in general, really. And this is kind of a general talk about all of college sports, not just basketball, but it is the Name, Image, and Likeness Rights Act, whatever you want to call it, in terms of now college athletes being given the opportunity to sign endorsement deals, sign, ways to make money through their likeness, as pretty much all of us were able to do. If someone wants to call me up and put my picture on the side of a truck for a monetary value, I am available. Unfortunately, if you were a college athlete for the last 50, 60 years, that was not an option unless you gave up your eligibility, which wasn't really a factor because you're not going to give up, $1 million career, hopefully, for a $50,000 spot on an IKEA ad. So now we are looking at athletes being able to market themselves, being able to do this. My question to you, Raider Jim, is not just how does it change college basketball, but how does this change college athletics in general?
This is such a can of worms, it seems like. I mean, how can you not say, if you're playing on if you're being recruited, let's just put it that way, if you're being recruited by a top 5 team, and then, or a couple top 5 teams, but then you're recruited by a couple teams that are top 20 teams. Where is your name and image going to more likely sell more swag, more merchandise? It's going to sell more when you play for Alabama if you're playing college football. Probably going to sell more if you're playing for Gonzaga, but maybe not. Maybe in basketball, maybe it's going to be UCLA. So yeah, I think this is definitely, it takes the playing field and it makes it a bit uneven. Think about it. If somebody came to you, Brandon, and said, okay, kid, it's signing day. Think of all the endorsement opportunities, because we know you're going to start as a true freshman. So do you want to start for the University of California, San Diego out at La Jolla, or do you want to start at Baylor? I wonder where you're going to go. And so it adds a lot more. It gives the upper hand to all those with the boosters, the better backing like that. And so for recruiting, I think it just kind of like, it takes the scales and it tips them in favor of those higher profile schools.
I agree. And I'll kind of even elaborate a little deeper into that. Is you look at, now for me, Oregon is the big one. Phil Knight, the CEO, founder, owner, whatever his official title is with Nike. There's a reason Oregon have about I don't think they wear the same jersey at all. It's because Nike owns them, or is a massive, obviously Phil Knight, massive booster. Mm-hmm. So Phil Knight can now say, look, to my cornerback that's looking at Bama, that's looking at USC, that's looking at UCLA, Tennessee, all these big schools. Hey, well, guess what? That's fine. You can go to those schools and good luck getting Nike on the phone or blah, blah, blah. Guess what? Phil Knight's going to be at practice. Same thing at, I believe, Maryland. Now, Maryland's a little different because it's not the big, but Under Armour, I believe, is still, now they're not the big, but they used to be the we must protect this house thing. Same thing. So I do believe even in the big time schools, Oregon immediately is over here going, yes, because we could sit here every single school, because that's another thing I think people miss, not school, excuse me, every single team or athletic team, because that's, I think, something that other people miss is this isn't a stipend now that every college athlete is going to be paid X number of dollars. No, this is you essentially selling yourself, and not in a, that way, but selling your likeness. So if you're playing field hockey, you're probably not going to be affected by this. If you are the backup kicker, you have a lot better shot than the star soccer player, the star swimmer. Let's just be honest. I mean, football, basketball, those are going to sell.
That's it.
I think for most other sports, I don't think this changes a whole lot. Now, in terms of football and basketball, where it does change things, you brought it up, the can of worms. I believe it opens up so many great possibilities, because I've always felt the NCAA has, I don't like to say the word taken advantage of, but I believe they have profited greatly off of certain situations. When you look at the way the NCAA handles things, the way they handle student mistakes or athletic ineligibility or things like that, compared to how they look at their coaches or their presidents and things like that, it's wildly misconstrued. The athletes are a dime a dozen essentially, but these presidents and these head coaches like Nick Saban and Urban Meyer and things like that, well, they're selling things. They are on those commercials. You'll see Aflac and Nick Saban. They used to joke all the time, how frustrated must it be to be a player at Alabama. Now I'll pretend that they're, struggling to make ends meet, but I'm sure there's somebody in Alabama's booster that will give you some money, but let's just pretend that you're making, you're struggling as a college student. You're watching TV on a Monday. There's your coach in 4 different commercials, yet you are not allowed to sell your name and image, for profit. And also, this is going to open up at the junior high and high school levels some really big time snakes that were already kind of taken out of the situation because of the rules, but now they're going to come in.
That's the Reggie Bush situation.
Exactly.
That's exactly what it was.
And, you know, and now that can be covered up with, hey, what do you call it? I don't know. I'm just looking around. Mirror Sports is going to sign you. We'll never see Reggie Bush on anything. It's a cover. It's, hey, we gave him $100,000 to say that he is an athlete for Mirror Sports. Well, guess what? Mirror Sports doesn't exist, but someone's going to give him $100,000, and now that is legal. Now, once again,
and I will tell you the other angle for me is, so blue chipper Brandon Ferst signs his letter of intent, and he's going to go play at Alabama. And here is third-year player Jim Martinez, who's never missed a practice, was a walk-on, has gotten his ass kicked spring in and spring out, and has yet to start a game and isn't making a dime from this situation. And this freshman walks in and all of a sudden is flashing more money than my parents have ever seen. I don't know what it's going to do to the environment inside the locker room in some cases.
Fantastic point. That didn't even cross my mind, because you already have egos, right? Whether we're talking football and basketball, and I'm mainly focusing on football and basketball because I really do think that those are going to be the biggest ones affected by this. You'll see other athletes in other sports understood, but the great majority will be in these two sports. But you know what, in an or a college football locker room, just a football locker room in general, there's a lot of competition, just offense, defense, backup starter, things like that. And like you said, first time someone says, oh, well, you know what? I just signed with Under Armour for $600,000. What about you? And that right there will sow resentment and things like that. And
exactly,
that's a fantastic point.
And maybe, you know, I tend to, by virtue of what I do for a living, I always have to start at the worst case scenario and then write procedures up to turn the switch on and your power outage is gone. You know, but I have to start at what is the worst case scenario. Worst case scenario here too, as with all the focus that continues to build on mental health and things like that. So now you got this 18-year-old kid who maybe deserves this contract because they are going to use his face, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What kind of pressure is that to play when you're hurt? What happens if you drop that winning ball in the end zone? Because everybody's going to come at you with, what are you paying for? Why'd you, you know, and you know, not so much in football because they're so removed from the fans, but what about in what we talked about with Coach View getting jeered at these visiting, you know, when they're on the road? What about those kids that go into a Poly Pavilion or to the Kennel up in Spokane, and somebody on the other team, you know, it's just been put in the paper, got a 6-7 figure endorsement package? They're going to get hammered, and they're dumb animals. I mean, you know, they're not mature. It's going to be hard to take, because you can play basketball well, doesn't mean you're mature. Rui Hachimura, Japanese star from the Gonzaga team 2 years ago. I still don't know what's going on, but the last I heard, he's missing in action. They can't find the guy. What do you mean? He plays for the Washington Wizards. He went from college to this. He was on the Japanese national basketball team, but they said when he came back, because the team had not performed, his national team didn't perform as well as they had hoped for in the Olympics. He just wasn't the same. And all of a sudden, boom, gone.
Yeah.
So, you know, and again, I don't know what his current status is. Hopefully he's fine. But yeah, again, there you go. Just because you're making the money and just because you've, you know, your door's open for you, doesn't mean you got your act together.
Amen. And you brought it up. Believe me, giving large sums of money to an 18, 19, 20, 21, 22-year-old is not going to make them mature. It's going to do
Henry Ruggs.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a situation. And to talk about the flip side of this, we're talking about football and basketball here, which are both, I think, considered either fall or winter sports. Okay. They're not considered spring sports.
Yes.
Which means these games will end. And for pretty much all of them, they'll still have at least another semester of school. Well, guess what? You're that star freshman at Kentucky, basketball season ends. Do you need to go to AP Bio or biology? Do you need to continue to go to school so that you can use the cafeteria when Adidas gave you $650,000? No.
Right.
You're going to the NBA. And I know this happens in college basketball, but I think it will be an uptick in this. And a lot of coaches they will put out for parents on the recruiting trail. Look at my percentages of kids who graduate. Because at the end of the day, that's what parents are thinking of first and foremost. What are you going to do? How are you going to get my kid to graduate? Sure, it'd be great if my kid goes and plays in the NBA or NFL, but at the end of the day, more than likely, at some point, that is going to end. Actually, not more than likely. At some point, it is going to end.
Right.
What will be their backup plan? How can you be me for 4 years, making sure this kid does what he's supposed to for his backup plan? Because I really do believe in recruiting, that is in most situations, I think that has a bigger bearing than a lot of people think. With those parental households that, really have big time, they're not worried about, games on ESPN. They're not worried. They're worried about the culture, the environment, and how that kid is going to get the degree. Because you ask any parent, more than likely, they are going to say degree first, draft second, championships third. I mean, just get your degree. Everything else will work itself out. You'll be upset if you don't make it, blah, blah, blah. But you know what? You're going to be able to survive. And that's something I think they have to deal with. It's, as you said, such a slippery slope. And to be honest, I don't even think we're anywhere near and you brought up a perfect scenario that didn't even cross my mind, which was, of course, the locker room environment. There's a very good chance there's a scenario out there in a year or two that's gonna rear its ugly head that hasn't even got into our realm of possibilities. So
you could be that kid that gets the deal, walk in and be the most hated person in that locker room.
100%. Yeah,
Easily.
I mean, you kind of have to. I'm not going to say have to, but you're not going to get a whole lot of people that are running over and being
nobody's
like,
gonna feel
goodness.
sorry for you.
Yeah. Like, I want to be your friend. Like, you're coming in with a target on your back. You're coming in, like you said, the pressure, not only of the outside world of whoever is sponsoring you, blah, 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 but the kids and the teammates to go, okay, 5 seconds left in the game. The ball's in your hands. You better make that shot. I'm not getting paid six figures. You are. So do it, and it's going to, like you said, change a lot of things. But at the same time, I think it's the right thing to do. Like, I'm not going to be the old man that says, no, you can't do this. No, it's just, I think in the early days, there's going to have to be some way. And I think it really is going to fall on the universities on how to police this, because if there's one thing we've seen over the years, the NCAA might have a uniformed idea of things, but that doesn't mean it's right. They might have a governing body that's going to put plans into action, but that doesn't mean that they're going to put the right plans in action. So same thing could be said for universities, but at least I think majority of them will do the right thing.
And from the get-go, though, it seems so, it's such a biased thing, because do you really think North Dakota State is going to have a bunch of blue chip companies run into one of their players to offer them endorsements? No, it is still a very segregated piece of the NCAA sports, football and basketball, that are going to get all this. They're going to reap the benefits of this. Not that they already don't, because they do. I mean, it's obvious, but this is just going to add to it.
Agreed. I think when it's all said and done, the first 5 years of this, hopefully, I'm sure that someone will come out with something, or there'll be numbers out there, but I really only think it'll be 1.5% of student athletes that get any type of monetary something from their likeness. Like we said, even North Dakota up there, I mean, you might get your local electrician to run an ad, with you on it, but that's $1,500 maybe. We're not talking big time to the point, real life-changing money for a lot of these kids. It's probably only going to be, might not even be 1%, could be even lower than that. Because,
I would imagine.
Yeah, even if you do play for Alabama and you're the starting left tackle, I mean, do you know him off the top of your head? No. You know?
Right.
Yeah, but the starting quarterback, DJ's at Clemson, Bryce is at Alabama. So, those are the ones, the first name guys, things like that. But we'll see how that goes. But moving on to the last bit of our show today, as I guess we kind of have to, throwing out, as pretty much everyone is, their final four picks. I'll start on my end. Not really a whole lot of surprise here about these teams. But look, it's November. I don't think anybody's out too far on a limb right now, unless you're all in on, St. Bonaventure or Houston, something like that. But for me, my final four picks, I think Kansas gets in there. Talked about it earlier. I think they want redemption. They have four returning starters from a team that was pretty darn good last year. Also, obviously, Gonzaga, I don't think, after what we saw last year, I don't know how anybody really kind of combats that Twin Towers down low, and then the depth last year that Gonzaga showed works its way up into that starting lineup. And I think they get the job done. Michigan as well. I think Hunter Dickinson, big men in college basketball are the golden tickets to the Charlie Chocolate Factory, to the Chocolate Factory, the Willy Wonka Chocolate Factory, excuse me. If you have one, more than likely you're going to be a Sweet 16 contender at the very least. Michigan has a lot more than that. And the last one, it pains me to do it as a USC fan, but it is UCLA. We obviously saw what they did last year, bringing most guys back. Keep an eye on Illinois. I know they took a loss last night to Marquette, but that was without Kofi Cockburn. His suspension is now over, I believe. I think he'll be back for their next game, but keep an eye there. But those four picks were my final four picks. We'll see how they goes. Once again, I'm not shocking anybody. That was pretty much chalk right there, but I think I'll get at least two of those teams in the final four. But Raider Jim, what are your thoughts on your own final four?
What are we in here? Week 2, week 3. It's hard to not look at the top four and say that is the top four. That's going to be it. Gonzaga, UCLA, Kansas, Michigan. But looking outside of those and say, okay, what if it's not? Who's not there? If it's not all four of those, well, then I think there's going to be a team that's going to make a big run, and they're fast, and good shooters, and that's going to be Memphis. Memphis is a good team, and watch for them. I think they're going to surprise some people. Also, Purdue's going to play real strong this year. Purdue, Michigan's going to be a fun game when it happens. But really, again, you look at the top four right now, and kind of hard to not just shrug and say, well, there it is. That looks like it. I think people were surprised. Nobody at this stage of the game last year thought that just because they were 1 and 2 really believed that come the last dance, it was going to be Baylor and Gonzaga. But man, they all proved a lot of people wrong, because there they were.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with that. I think with Holmgren, I think Gonzaga, this is even a better chance for them than it was last year. Even if they drop a couple games along the way, they are being questioned about how good is their perimeter shooting, and looked pretty good to me the other night. So if they can come through and get into that tournament, I think they're going to make a strong run. And I would really like to see an athlete and an individual such as Drew Timmie end a very, very good college career with that trophy.
Amen. Yeah, and I'll be honest. When I put that together, I did not realize I took 1 through 4 in the rankings. Hey, it is what it is. Excuse me. I knew I wasn't going out on a limb, but I took the whole chalk and just wrote it down. Yeah. But I like what you said about Purdue as well. That's another team. I just wonder about the Big Ten, because the Big Ten is such a buzzsaw. It's kind of like the SEC in football. You're going 8 or 9 deep, where any night, we're talking about Michigan State kind of being a bit of a downturn, and they're still, Michigan State was like 12th last year in the Big Ten, or 10th, and they still made the tournament, or almost made the tournament, whatever it was. That just shows the depth. I even brought up Illinois, obviously Michigan. There's a lot of depth in that Big Ten. It's going to be very difficult. I do feel like sometimes that just kind of grinded out Big Ten Midwestern basketball. By the time we hit March, it's just kind of taken a toll on some of these teams, but we'll see how that goes. So that's what we got for you on this first episode of In the Paint, as we, of course, will be with you all year long as we dive even deeper into the basketball season. But Raider Jim, final thoughts for In the Paint.
There was I don't know how breaking this is, but I forgot I had seen it earlier today and I wanted to make sure to mention it. Very interesting. Next year, 2022 season, Loyola Chicago is going to be in the Atlantic 10. So that's going to be interesting. I mean, they have really stepped up anyway. They're a strong program. So, good for them. And I can't wait to see how that plays out. But that's next year. We got a whole season yet to play. And just looking forward to what happens this weekend. And of course, we're going to have all kinds of football and basketball next week, Thanksgiving week.
Yep. Yeah, it's that time of year. And in terms of Loyola Chicago, look, I am here for anything that can get me more Sister Jean.
There you go. Right.
Yeah, she's an absolute treasure. And for those, and that's a fantastic program that's been built there as well. It wasn't kind of that 1 year, with all due respect to George Mason, but that was kind of a 1 year thing. Loyola Chicago, definitely not been a 1 year thing. That's been a team over the last I brought it up, I think last year, a bit of a Midwestern Gonzaga, at least the early stages of that.
Right.
Taking a step up though into the Atlantic 10. Great for them. I think it's great, exposure. But they're going to have to definitely kind of step up going. I think were they in the Missouri Valley or the?
Yes, that's correct.
It was the Missouri Valley, which is a good conference in its own right, but the Atlantic 10, VCU, Richmond, Dayton, kind of that upper tier mid-major. I don't know how it's going, but anyways, with that, folks, thank you all so much for listening to this first season edition of the In the Paint podcast here, presented by the First Off the Bench podcast network. Everyone comes off the bench, but we are first. It's time for you all to go wash your hands and stop hating, everybody. We'll talk to you all very soon. Have a wonderful week. Take care.
Peace out, everybody.